Some people ask, what is the origin of the soul? How and when was the soul born? So, Gita tells us, Na jayate mriyate va kadachi, nayam bhutva bhavita vana bhuya, aja nitya sajta hem puran, na hanyate hanyamane sharire. Aja Nitya Shashvata. Aja is the soul, Nitya is always, Shashvat is non-perishable, sustained. Nahanyate hanyamane sharire. Even when the body dies, the soul does not die. Na jayate mriyate va kadachi. Neither is it born, nor does it die. So, you understand that how was the soul born is a wrong question, because it was not, for something to be born, it has to be non-existent before its birth, like the body. You as a body were not present at some point in time, and then there is a defined presence. So, because the soul surpasses the confines of space and time are the two axes of the manifest world, and between these two axes, the material beings, material in the sense coordinates the time and the space. So when was the soul born is a wrong question, because it was born before the origin of time. So the reference frame that you cannot define the birth of the soul using the time frame. Similarly, where was the soul born? It cannot be answered, because the question itself is filled with the premise that it has to be born in the material world. But it was present before material world manifested, and it was present at places, if you will, before space was created. So of the 5 Mahabhuts, the most subtle is the space Mahabhut. Now, when you talk about lokas, that's the same concept. You think about Prithvi Lok. So that is Bhulok, Bhuarlok, Swarglok, Janlok, Taplok, Maharlok, Satyalok, and your Vaikuntha, or the ultimate abode. But Brahmalok. The other states are more in the ethereal realms that cannot be defined. Just like planets, the inner 4 planets are the solid planets, the Mercury, Venus, Earth and Mars, then the asteroid belt, and then the gas planets. So, in astrology, you take influence of all the 9 planets or the Graha. So, planets themselves are not having the same composition of Mahabhuts. Similarly, there are planets beyond the elements of the Mahabhut or the gaseous planets. Just because they cannot be seen by the naked eye or by the best telescope doesn't mean they do not exist. Just because you don't remember doesn't mean it does not happen. Reincarnation. Same theory. So, how was the soul born is a wrong question, because the soul was present before the origin of time. Now, if you want to still understand, like, how did it come into being, you have to overcome this restraint of space and time. And then I can tell you that the simplest analogy you can use to the so-called birth or origin of the soul is the analogy of rain and the ocean. The ocean came before the rivers. The rain is the modality which evaporates the ocean into clouds, condenses them as glaciers on mountain tops, which melts through the Mahabhut of Bhu to join the ocean again. So, if you ask me, in that analogy, Paramatma is the ocean. Every time the Paramatma, a portion of the Paramatma, is breaking away, or I should say Brahma, the Supreme Consciousness, is breaking away to form an independent moiety, it becomes the cloud. And then it goes and makes trips in this manifest world. Consider it to be glacier on the top of the mountain, which is melting again and again, from its origin as the glacier or the birth as a child, it manifests itself through a river meandering through the valleys, plains, plateaus, ultimately only to end up join as a um as a delta or a estuary, finally merging into the ocean. That represents the death. So the content is same water that is being cycled through water in the oceans, vapor, water vapor in the clouds, condensation as glacier at the top of the mountain, melting again to flow as a river through the earth, only to join back its origin, so-called Paramatma. So similar is your story. You were part of the Supreme Consciousness. Eluded by the forces of prana, you decided to hitchhike with this material energy, Mahaprana, to go and get evaporated in this state of identity, because you are something different from the ocean. You are a water vapor. So that is the state where the splitting happens. Once the splitting happens, because you have taken up ignorance from awareness, you have switched to ignorance, willful ignorance, because you wanted to make those trips. You have to incorporate an identity. Without identity, there cannot be ignorance. When there is ignorance, there will be identity. Identity and ignorance are cog and the wheel. They go together. And that is how you make trips through the prana. So that identity that you create is the early identity through the subtle bodies. The bodies that the Atman incorporates as the first mantle, which is the manas, buddhi, ahamkar, and your, if you want to think about it, then the indriyas, because indriyas are part of the manas, the thought process. Whatever you focus to, choose to focus on, that is what you will become. Your thoughts is what will manifest. So you will become the content of your thoughts eventually. So once you have evaporated as the water vapor, or in this case, once you have so-called split from the super soul, the Paramatma, you as a soul, the whole purpose was to take journeys and experiences to the material world, because you wanted to experience something different than the unmanifest, supreme, peaceful totality that you were existing. Only to realize that this so-called surges of pleasure and pain are somehow not your cup of tea. You do not like the over-dramatic representation where you go in pleasure bouts through dopamine, or extreme pain and suffering bouts through Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. And then you are forced into this karma bandhan. What was free has now become bound by the rules of the prana, material world. Because you are traveling in the strain that is the prana, and you are the body inside that. So, my friends, the question, where does soul come from? The simplest answer I can tell you is that the soul was present before the birth of time, and it was present at places where the Mahabhuts were not existing. So you cannot use the same analogy as the birth of the body to the birth of the soul, because soul is the supreme consciousness, the observer. The observer can still exist even when there is nothing to observe. So being that supreme consciousness, splitting from the supreme consciousness because of your heightened awareness, you wanted to experience something new, the Atman breaks away from the Paramatman. But wherever the Atman goes, the Paramatman goes with it, because the Paramatman is the ultimate, supreme observer. And that is how a record book is kept of all the deeds that are done by this body, embodied soul, so that the karma bandhan can continue and new births can be created for you based on your proclivities, your tendencies, your past resentments, regrets, based on your past aspirations, hopes, inspirations, motivations. All those things coming together will be plastered as your past samskaras in conjunction with the present vrittis or gunas that you come in contact with. creates new karmas, and the cycle goes on. But the soul is only a part of the supreme consciousness that will that has broken away. So eventually that raindrop, or I should say the cloud which is condensing as the glacier, has to either flow as a river and get back, or it can just get back from the cloud as a raindrop back into the ocean. But sooner or later, the path might be filled with detours through glaciers, rivers back into the ocean, or just as a cloud condensing as a raindrop back into the ocean. It has to return to the ocean. It has to return to the ocean. So if you do not make it back in this kalpa, yuga, then again, when unmanifest freezing happens, you are stuck where you were, and the soul again will get a chance in the next cycle to go back. So this is the constant repetitive cycle we are a part of, where the supreme consciousness has breaks into single moiety consciousness, or Atman, that travels through these manifest worlds. And some of them will go through this journey and get back to their Paramatman in the liberated state. Most of them like to keep cycling back and forth, and they will collect all the experiences. At some point, their awareness rises because of the Jam Mrityu Jara Vyadhi suffering, realizing that's not their true identity. So in search of this true identity, which is the ocean they are, the supreme consciousness they are, they merge themselves back into that. So the independent individual existence of the water vapor in the cloud or the cube of ice in the glacier does not exist anymore, because it has gone back into submergence with the cosmic consciousness, the ocean of water that you were, and that is what your true identity is, if you want to call it an identity, because it is the unity, totality. There is one without the other. That's the beauty of Brahman. That's the beauty of totality, that you can call yourself the ocean. And every drop, if you want to distinguish it as such, as long as it is inside the totality of the ocean, is the ocean. So there is no singular separate identity. Whenever you have this singular separate identity, you become the Atman and collect experiences and try to navigate yourself back into the supreme consciousness called Paramatman. So right now, all of us are in this broken, fragmented, sequestered state where we had split from the Paramatman to experience all the things that are going on, and it's becoming the pseudo-doer, because the real doer is the Prakriti. Prakriti kramarani guna karmani sarasha ahankar atma kartahamiti manyate. Ridden by the ahamkar or the ego, we think ourselves to be the doer using this five-fold material body which we have rented from Prakriti, and under this impression, we think ourselves to be the doer, and that's why we are suffering through the cycles of karma, because the karma bandhan is the kernel in the Karan Sharir, where it is united. The soul is united with the karma bandhan to form the Karan Sharir. And then there is that inner mantle of the Sukshma Sharir, what we talk about, the mind, intellect, ego, senses. With the body, of course, is the Sthul Sharir. So those distinctions you are not, those distinctions you have hired, those distinctions you have created to gain the experiences through the ignorance of identity. And that is how you circle in this manifest world. Hopefully, during the process of coordinates of space and time in this manifest world, you can merge back into the supreme consciousness, the ocean that you were, giving up your individual identity of a raindrop. Or the other option is to keep cycling back and forth until this kalpa ends, and again the new kalpa starts, where you get another chance to find your original identity. Because I don't like using the word identity, because itself is flawed as you being something different from the rest, and this distinction is what creates the agyan or the avidya that creates the need for the experiences in the material world or samsara. So you are the soul, you are the separated individual moiety that broke off from the supreme consciousness, Paramatma, Brahman, to take hitchhiking rides with the prana or the mahaprana, the potentiality of manifestation in the coordinates of space and time, through which you cycle back and forth, until you find yourself back with the Supreme Consciousness, one with the Supreme Consciousness, and merge back into the Brahman through the thousand petaled Sahasrara, through finding your path back using the modalities of Panch Pratyahara and Tri Yog, Dhyan Yog, Nishkam Karm Yog, Bhakti Yog. Hope you like this lecture. Please leave your comments below. Jai Shri Ram.